morning. It's a real pleasure and honor for me to speak to you today on these issues. First of all, in person, which I think is very refreshing. Regardless that we speak about digital finance, it's always good to meet in person. And I think the challenge that was raised is quite difficult, because you were promised an exciting speech on EU legislation, which is sometimes very difficult to manage. For those who are familiar with EU regulatory frameworks, I think you know what I'm talking about. It's everything but exciting. But let me try to stand up for the challenge and see what we can do about it. I think, first of all, it's actually a very timely moment to speak about megatrends transforming the financial industry, because we see many things happening, not only recently, obviously, there's a development for quite a number of years already, but I think what we see now is its acceleration on one hand, and what we see also in a much broader context is what is happening globally in many jurisdictions, not only in the European Union. And I think this is a specific pressure that is also put on our side, not only as you representative of industry, but I think also on us as legislators, regulators, and supervisors, because we sort of, whether you like it or not, we are part of the landscape and ecosystem. And I think we also need to transform and be ready to match the pace that is ongoing, and in my view, that is accelerating. As I said, there has been a lot of done on also on EU legislation recently. Long time ago, I think in some aspects that were slightly touching individual elements of financial industry world. I think we all are familiar, and we all remember discussion about the review of Payment Services Directive, the PSD2, which was a step to open data, to allow for better access, to help to actually build open banking as ecosystem. And since then, I think there's a number of initiatives that are making sure the EU legislation is fit for 21st century, also regarding specifically the digitalization, but also I think other aspects in this regard. I started my work in the European Parliament back in 2019, and one of the first reports that we drafted was a specific report on the digital finance and what should we do with the digital finance to help it grow in Europe. And there was a number of issues that we touched upon. And I think since then we saw also the European Commission proposing a number of legislation, either pure legislation or public policy initiatives to address those issues. Be it already mentioned markets and crypto assets, the digital resilience to enhance the cyber security and cyber resilience issues, electronic ID that would be working all across the European Union and all its 27 member states, and many other aspects. And I think beyond that, there is also a lot of happening, let's say, in not purely financial services regulation. And I'm specifically referring here to the question of data, because data, as you all know, become a critical matter for all the industries, including the financial industry, but also become a clear element of competitiveness for the businesses to grow in future. And you all know that the European Union is trying to build up the entire new architecture of regulatory framework dealing with data, and we are all expecting proposal. And I've been to discussion yesterday in Brussels and a week ago also about the open finance framework, what this can actually bring together with also evaded review of the Payment Services Directive, what this can bring in terms of enhancing innovation and opening, improving the access to data, not only the financial services data, but ideally also non-financial data, so that the industry can grow. I think there's a lot of expectation. It's a huge challenge. We expect the proposal coming from the European Commission before summer. So let's hope that we will see something eventually. But I think this will be also one of the important topics that potentially we may discuss next year in this conference. How to structure this framework. We should speak about megatrends that are transforming the financial industry together with the EU legislation, and I don't think we can start with anything else but the digitalization. That's I think what you are mostly dealing with, and in the end, this is something that will and should be the key driving force for innovation in Europe, but also for maintaining and enhancing, ideally, European competitiveness. There has been a lot done. I mentioned Payment Services Directive, the open banking, many other areas, including introduction of new forms of payments, new forms of access to finance, new types of financial products, new players in the sector, and obviously the entire sector of digital assets, including decentralized finance, uptake of artificial intelligence technology. I already mentioned the issue of data. Many things happening at the same time, and to be honest, I think what we see now, and you can definitely have a lot of examples provided in this area. The COVID pandemic, which was obviously very negative in its globality, actually helped and accelerate this transformation very much, especially to those areas of economies that were not going digital by default, or they were not actually even thinking going digital, including person-to-person services, or very small parts of, let's say, traditional economies. I think they all went to discover digital instruments, what is actually there for them, so that they can continue their operations, build their resilience, and use new tools. And now we are confronted with this accelerated uptake of technologies. Coming back to EU legislation, we are not the fastest legislators in the world. That's, I think, quite clear. It takes a lot of years to finally come up with a solution. To give you an example on the marketing crypto assets regulation, that one was it was mentioned back in 2018 in the Commission working plan. So now it's 5 years ago, and it's still not in application. It took us a couple of years to negotiate it. It also took it to the European Commission a couple of years to prepare it, and now it will take a couple of years to actually put it in full application. So between the very idea of coming up with a regulatory framework and its full application, there's a time gap of 7 years. And that is incredibly long, especially for such a dynamic sector such as digital finance. So I think that's my message that I always try to convey to the legislators in the European Union. It's not always understood, I agree, but it should not stop me from doing it. I think what we should do in terms of legislation is we should actually prepare it for future. We should not look into too much details, too many details in terms of prescriptive rules, what should be exactly done. Because if the sector develops that fast, we would not be able to adopt something that is up to the current state of developments, be it in technology, be it in the market, business models globally, etc., etc. So I think the idea is really to look into the key principle we want to legislate on, and then also to come up with solutions that are forward-looking but also future-proof. It doesn't mean that we should not adopt the legislation at some point, but in my view, what is actually good about legislation, if it stays stable, predictable, and if it gives clear rules for the operators, for the stakeholders, for businesses to basically use them and grow together with the regulatory framework. If we change it every other year, that would not be good. And I think not only for your activities and for your planning and for your technological development, but also on the side of public sector. And this is something that I would like to also echo and maybe send a message, an invitation, which I think is sometimes missing in the debates. In order to make sure that the EU legislation is working, is workable, and it makes sense, I think the clear engagement between the industry and the regulators and the supervisors is needed. We can speak about sandboxes, and we have adopted, for instance, the pilot regime for DLT technologies. In my view, a good piece of legislation. Let's see how it will be used in practice. But I think it's really about a permanent regulatory debate, permanent regulatory exchange, because there's a lot of actually that also the regulators and supervisors have to do. And I keep repeating this in various negotiations, and I know that the authorities don't like to hear it because they obviously have their way of working. They are liable and responsible for application of the rules, but I think they should also acknowledge the fact that we are in the 21st century and that there is actually a lot of technology available that is not only helping you, industry, and the businesses to grow and innovate, but we can also make sure that the technology is properly taken on board by supervisors and by regulators so that their work is also much easier. And we can speak longly here about reporting under the anti-money laundering, counterterrorism financing rules, tax issues, number of areas where I think if the technology is properly acknowledged and then used also in terms of supervisory technology or regulatory technology on the public side, we can actually make sure that the life of industry is much easier. We can be more efficient, and we can also make sure that the regulatory framework is properly enforced, which is definitely one of the weak points at this stage. So I think my invitation to you would be, to the extent possible, try to engage also with supervisors, try to challenge them. It's not always easy, but I think the key is actually if we want to grow and develop, we need to do it together. And I've been working for quite some while in the public sector in various capacities, and I know there's a huge gap to bridge. So I think this should be one of our common endeavor in this regard. Maybe quickly on other mega trend that I believe is very visible in European Union, not to a certain extent also obviously impacting the financial industry, but also definitely impacting the innovation, and that's the issue of sustainable finance, ESG issues, basically the financial industry contribution to the climate policy and the climate transition. In my view, this definitely goes hand in hand with the digitalization as well. And I think there's actually a lot that can be brought in, especially by innovative financial industry players, which can help to make sure that the sustainability issues are better reflected, are, as we like to say in Brussels, are horizontally present all across activities and all across the sector. And I think there's actually a lot that you can contribute to, and also that we can create in terms of properly working regulatory framework. We have a sustainability finance plan, action plan in European Union. Some parts of the plan are already in place. Taxonomy on financial sustainable activities. We have the sustainability investment plan. Other pieces of legislation will follow, but I think this is inevitably a trend that would be reflected in the European legislation, and I think it will definitely merit a lot of attention from our side, as the data clearly shows that the market in this area is growing. I think that would be the key parts or the key messages I wanted to share with you. Obviously, I think the important part is that we look into specific part of regulatory framework that is clearly linked to the digital finance, but I'm pretty sure that you are also doing it, and we should also doing it in the European Parliament. There are other parts of financial services regulation that will have an impact also on how digital finance sector is developing. I already mentioned that general rules that are applicable for financial sector, anti-money laundering. We have currently a huge discussion in among European institutions how the modernized AML and counterterrorism financing framework would look like. This including the relevant references to crypto assets, digital assets, etc. I think this can have actually a huge impact on how the market will develop in the future. We have other parts of legislation, such as banking requirements under the Basel framework. And as I mentioned, the upcoming initiatives from the Commission on the payment services. So I think there's actually a lot to follow. I'm always among those members who try to engage actively with the industry and look for feedback on various proposals, either before the proposal is actually published or when it's negotiated in the European Parliament. I have to say that I have very good experience with various industry stakeholders in this regard from Brussels, and I'm really would like to also invite you to engage actively, be it on the national and also on the European level, with those who can help to address the concerns you have, because you are those who actually have the famous finger on what is happening in the industry. We always, in the legislation part, are sort of reacting to what is happening, and I think it would be very hard, as I mentioned, to do it properly without a good cooperation in this regard. And one last point that I would mention, but I'm also quite convinced that this is a perspective that you have. We sometimes tend to be very Eurocentric in Europe about the legislation and what we do, but there's a lot of things that would not make sense and would not be meaningful without a proper international cooperation. Especially in digital finance, Europe is not evolving as an island. There's a lot of interaction coming back and forth. I'm pretty sure that you have business partners coming from Northern America to Asia, and I think this is an important task, not only for the stakeholders, but also I think for us. And I'm quite happy that the European Commission, for instance, is very much looking into these areas to engage properly on the international level, be it on G7, G20 format, but also others, because this is critical. If we are able to agree on some rules, meaningful rules in Europe, we can be a source of inspiration for the others. But we should also not shy away from looking for the inspiration in other places. And I think this is something that can help mutually for us to improve and also to provide a regulatory framework that would be somehow consistent all across the globe, as the digital world doesn't know regular borders. So I would like to stop here with those messages. I hope that it was at least a bit exciting. I was not digging in too much details on how the legislation is being prepared and what will be the fun to follow with a number of delegated acts, implementing acts, and regulatory technical standards. You will enjoy that, I think, later. But I will be happy to address these issues more in the upcoming panel. Thank you very much.